Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome back to the live studios here at Radha Lane. Now, I'm going to explain to you why we're a little late, so please don't be upset with us. We just did a initiation ceremony and a short, abbreviated fire sacrifice, and then ran over here as quick as we could. So we did that for you because we're so attached to you and being with you. So thank you for showing up, if you did, and thank you for waiting, if you did. Okay, we're going ahead with the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and before we do, we're going to read Sanatana Goswami's beautiful, classic glorification of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, called Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram, from the Srila Krishna Lila Stava, and it goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidvandudita Ditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshaksharayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Mareka Bando Matsangin Madguru Man Mahadana Manishtadagamad Bhagya Madanandana Mostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu saduta dayin adini chochata kada hanamun chagadachin mam premna rit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter to the most fallen. Oh, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So we've reached the 15th chapter. The Pandavas retire timely. They found out that Krishna is leaving, and now they've decided to leave. Chapter 15, starting with verse 36. When the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, left this earthly planet in his self-same form, from that very day, Kali, who had already partially appeared, became fully manifest to create inauspicious conditions for those who were endowed with the poor fund of knowledge. Purport. The influence of Kali can be enforced only upon those who are not fully developed in God consciousness. One can neutralize the effects of Kali by keeping oneself fully under the supreme care of the personality of Godhead. The age of Kali ensued just after the battle of Kurukshetra, but it could not exert its influence because of the presence of the Lord. The Lord, however, left this earthly planet in his own transcendental body, and as soon as he left, the symptoms of the Kali Yuga, as were envisioned by Maharaj Yudhishthira prior to Arjuna's arrival from Dwarka, began to manifest. And Maharaj Yudhishthira rightly conjectured on the departure of the Lord from the earth. As we have already explained, the Lord left our sight just as when the sun sets, it is out of our sight. Text 37. Maharaj Yudhishthira was intelligent enough to understand the influence of the age of Kali, characterized by increasing avarice, falsehood, cheating, and violence throughout the capital, state, home, and among individuals. So he wisely prepared himself to leave home, and he dressed accordingly. Purport. The present age is influenced by the specific qualities of Kali. Since the days of the Battle of Kurukshetra, about 5,000 years ago, the influence of the age of Kali began manifesting, and from authentic scriptures it is learned that the age of Kali is still to run on for 427,000 years. The symptoms of the Kali Yuga, as mentioned above, namely avarice, falsehood, diplomacy, cheating, nepotism, violence, and all such things are already in vogue, and no one can imagine what is going to happen gradually with further increase of the influence of Kali till the day of annihilation. We have already come to know that the influence of the age of Kali is meant for godless, so-called civilized man. Those who are under the protection of the Lord have nothing to fear from this horrible age. Maharaj Yudhishthira was a great devotee of the Lord, and there was no necessity of his being afraid of the age of Kali, but he preferred to retire from active household life and prepare himself to go back home, back to Godhead. The Pandavas are eternal companions of the Lord, and therefore they are more interested in the company of the Lord than anything else. Besides that, being an ideal king, Maharaj Yudhishthira wanted to retire just to set an example for others. As soon as there is some young fellow to look after the household affairs, one should at once retire from family life to uplift oneself to spiritual realization. One should not rot in the dark well of household life till one is dragged out by the will of Yamaraj. Modern politicians should take lessons from Maharaj Yudhishthira about voluntary retirement from active life and should make room for the younger generation. Also, retired old gentlemen should take lessons from him and leave home for spiritual realization before forcibly dragged away to meet death. Text 38. Thereafter, in the capital of Hastinapura, he enthroned his grandson, who was trained and equally qualified as the emperor and master of all land bordered by the seas. Purport. The total land on the earth bordered by the seas was under the subjugation of the king of Hastinapura. Maharaj Yudhishthira trained his grandson, Maharaj Parikshit, who was equally qualified in state administration in terms of the king's obligation to the citizens. Thus Parikshit was enthroned on the seat of Maharaj Yudhishthira prior to his departure back to Godhead. Concerning Maharaj Parikshit, the specific word used, vinayinam, is very significant. Vinayinam is significant. Why was the king of Hastinapura, at least until the time of Maharaj Parikshit, accepted as the emperor of the world? The only reason is that the people of the world were happy because of the good administration of the emperor. The happiness of the citizens was due to the ample production of natural produce, such as grains, fruits, milk, herbs, valuable stones, minerals, and everything else that the people needed. They were even free from all bodily miseries, anxieties of mind, and disturbances caused by natural phenomena and other living beings. Because everyone was happy in all respects, there was no resentment, and although there were sometimes battles between the state kings for political reasons and supremacy, everyone was trained to attain the highest goal of life, and therefore the people were also enlightened enough not to quarrel over trivialities. The influence of the age of Kali gradually infiltrated the good qualities of both the kings and the citizens, and therefore a tense situation developed between the ruler and the ruled. But still, Even in this age of disparity between the ruler and the ruled, there can be spiritual emolument and God consciousness. That is a special prerogative. Text 39. Then he posted Vajra, the son of Aniruddha, grandson of Lord Krishna, at Mathura, as the king of Shurasena. Afterwards, Maharaj Yudhishthira performed a Prajapatya sacrifice and placed in himself the fire for quitting household life. Purport. Maharaj Yudhishthira, after placing Maharaj Parikshit on the imperial throne of Hastinapura, and after posting Bhadra, the great-grandson of Lord Krishna, as the king of Mathura, accepted the renounced order of life. Hare Krishna, Radhika Krishnananda, welcome. Maharaj Yudhishthira, after placing Maharaj Parikshit on the imperial throne of Hastinapura, and after posting Bhadra, the great-grandson of Lord Krishna, as the king of Mathura, accepted the renounced order of life. The system of 4 orders of life and 4 castes in terms of quality and work, known as Varnashrama Dharma, is the beginning of real human life. And Maharaj Yudhishthira, as the protector of this system of human activities, timely retired from active life as a sannyasi, handing over the charge of the administration to the trained prince, Maharaj Parikshit. The scientific system of Varnashrama Dharma divides the human life into 4 divisions of occupation and 4 orders of life. The 4 orders of life, as brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyasi, are to be followed by all, irrespective of the occupational division. Modern politicians do not wish to retire from active life, even if they are old enough. But Yudhishthira Maharaj, as an ideal king, voluntarily retired from active administrative life to prepare himself for the next life. Everyone's life must be so arranged that the last stage of life, say at least the last 15 to 20 years prior to death, can be absolutely devoted to the devotional service of the Lord, to attain the highest perfection of life. It is really foolishness to engage oneself all the days of one's life in material enjoyment and fruitive activities, because as long as the mind remains absorbed in fruitive work for material enjoyment, there is no chance of getting out from the conditioned life or material bondage. No one should follow the suicidal policy of neglecting one's supreme task of attaining the highest perfection of life, namely going back home, back to Godhead. Text 40. Haribol Sarva. Well done, I might say. I might add. Text 40. Maharaj Yudhishthira at once relinquished all his garments, belt, and ornaments of the royal order, and became completely disinterested and unattached to everything. Purport. To become purified of material contamination is the necessary qualification for becoming one of the associates of the Lord. No one can become an associate of the Lord or can go back to Godhead without such purification. Maharaj Yudhishthira, therefore, to become spiritually pure, at once gave up his royal opulence, relinquished his royal dress and garments. The kashaya, or saffron loincloth of a sannyasi, indicates freedom from all attractive material garments, and thus he changed his dress accordingly. He became disinterested in his kingdom and family, and thus became free from all material contamination or material designation. People are generally attached to various kinds of designations. The designations of family, society, country, occupation, wealth, position, and many others. As long as one is attached to such designations, he is considered materially impure. The so-called leaders of men in the modern age are attached by national consciousness, but they do not know that such false consciousness is also another designation of the materially conditioned soul. One has to relinquish such designations before one can become eligible to go back to Godhead. Foolish people adore such men who die in national consciousness. But here is an example of Maharaj Yudhishthira, a royal king who prepared himself to leave this world without such national consciousness. And yet he is remembered even today because he was a great pious king, almost on the same level with the personality of Godhead, Sri Rama. And because people of the world were dominated by such pious kings, they were happy in all respects. And it was quite possible for such great emperors to rule the world. Text 41. Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, then the mind into life, life into breathing, his total existence into the embodiment of the 5 elements, and his body into death. Then, as pure self, he became free from the material conception of life. Purport. Maharaj Yudhishthira, like his brother Arjuna, began to concentrate and gradually become freed from all material bondage. First he concentrated all the actions of the senses and amalgamated them into the mind. Or in other words, he turned his mind toward the transcendental service of the Lord. He prayed that since all material activities are performed by the mind in terms of actions and reactions of the material senses, and since he was going back to Godhead, the mind would wind up its material activities and be turned towards the transcendental service to the Lord. There was no longer a need for material activities. Actually, the activities of the mind cannot be stopped, for they are the reflection of the eternal soul. But the quality of the activities can be changed from matter to the transcendental service of the Lord. The material color of the mind is changed when one washes it from contaminations of life breathing, and thereby frees it from the contamination of repeated births and deaths, and situates it in pure spiritual life. All is manifested by the temporary embodiment of the material body, which is a production of the mind at the time of death. And if the mind is purified by practice of transcendental loving service to the Lord, and is constantly engaged in the service of the Lord, the lotus feet of the Lord, there is no more chance of the mind's producing another material body after death. It will be freed from absorption in material contamination. The pure soul will be able to return home, back to Godhead. Text 42. Thus annihilating the gross body of 5 elements into the 3 qualitative modes of material nature, he merged them in one nations, and then absorbed that nations in the self, which is inexhaustible in all circumstances. Purport. All that is manifested in the material world is the product of the Mahat Tattva Avyakta. The things that are visible in our material vision are nothing but combinations and permutations of such variegated material products. But the living entity is different from such material products. It is due to the living entity's forgetfulness of his eternal nature as eternal servitor of the Lord, and his false conception of being a so-called Lord of material nature, that he is obliged to enter into the existence of false sense enjoyment. Thus a concomitant generation of material energies is the principal cause of the mind's being materially affected. Thus the gross body of 5 elements is produced. Maharaj Yudhishthira reversed the action and merged the 5 elements of the body in the 3 modes of material nature. The qualitative distinction of the body as being good, bad, or mediocre is extinguished, and again the qualitative manifestations become merged in the material energy, which is produced from a false sense of the pure living being. When one is thus inclined to become an associate of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, in one of the innumerable planets of the spiritual sky, especially in Goloka Vrindavan, one has to think always that he is different from the material energy. He has nothing to do with it, and he has to realize himself as pure spirit, Brahman, qualitatively equal with the Supreme, Brahman, Parameshwara. Maharaj Yudhishthira, after distributing his kingdom to Parikshit and Bhadra, did not think himself emperor of the world or head of the Kuru dynasty. This sense of freedom from material relations, as well as freedom from the material engagement of the gross and subtle encirclement, makes one free to act as the servitor of the Lord, even though one is in the material world. This stage is called the Jivan Mukta stage, or the liberated stage, even in the material world. That is the process of ending material existence. One must not only think that he is Brahman, but must act like Brahman. One who only thinks himself Brahman is an impersonalist, and one who acts like Brahman is the pure devotee. Text 43. After that, Maharaj Yudhishthira dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up eating all solid foods, voluntarily became dumb, and let his hair hang loose. All this combined to make him look like an urchin or madman with no occupation. He did not depend on his brothers for anything, and just like a deaf man, he heard nothing. Purport. Thus, being freed from all external affairs, he had nothing to do with imperial life or family prestige, and for all practical purposes, he posed himself exactly like an inert, mad urchin, and did not speak of material affairs. He had no dependence on his brothers, who had all along been helping him. This stage of complete independence from everything is also called the purified stage of fearlessness. Text 44. He then started towards the north, treading the path accepted by his forefathers and great men, to devote himself completely to the thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he lived in that way wherever he went. Purport. It is understood from this verse that Maharaj Yudhishthira followed in the footsteps of his forefathers and the great devotees of the Lord. We have discussed many times before that the system of Varnashram Dharma, as it was strictly followed by the inhabitants of the world, we have discussed many times before that the system of the Varnashram Dharma, as it was strictly followed by the inhabitants of the world, specifically by those who inhabited the Aryavarta province of the world, emphasizes the importance of leaving all household connections at a certain stage of life. The training and education was so imparted that thus a respectable person like Maharaj Yudhishthira had to leave all family connection for self-realization and going back to Godhead. No king or respectable gentleman would continue family life till the end, because that was considered suicidal and against the interest of the perfection of human life. In order to be freed from all family encumbrances and devote oneself 100% in the devotional service of Lord Krishna, this system is always recommended for everyone because it is the path of authority. The Lord instructs in the Bhagavad Gita 1862 that one must become a devotee of the Lord, at least at the last stage of one's life. A sincere soul of the Lord, like Maharaj Yudhishthira, must abide by this instruction of the Lord for his own interest. The specific words Parabrahmaparam, Brahmaparam, indicate Lord Sri Krishna. This is corroborated in the Bhagavad Gita 10:13 by Arjuna with reference to great authorities like Asita, Devala, Narada, and Vyasa. Thus Maharaj Yudhishthira, while leaving home for the north, constantly remembered Lord Sri Krishna within himself, following in the footsteps of his forefathers, as well as the great devotees of all times. Text 45. The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthira observed that the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world, and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore, they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother. Purport. The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthira were already obedient followers of the great emperor, and they had sufficiently been trained to know the ultimate goal of life. They therefore decidedly followed their eldest brother in rendering devotional service to Lord Sri Krishna. According to the principles of Sanatana Dharma, one must retire from family life after half the duration of life is finished and must engage himself in self-realization. But the question of engaging oneself is not always decided. Sometimes retired men are bewildered about how to engage themselves for the last days of life. Here is a decision by authorities like the Pandavas. All of them engaged themselves in favorably culturing the devotional service of Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to Swami Sridhara, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, or fruitive activities, philosophical speculations, and salvation, as conceived by several persons, are not the ultimate goal of life. They are more or less practiced by persons who have no information of the ultimate goal of life. The ultimate goal of life is already indicated by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita 1865, and the Pandavas were intelligent enough to follow it without hesitation. Text 46. They had all performed all the religious principles. They had already performed all the principles of religion, and as a result, rightly decided that the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna are the supreme goal of all. Therefore, they meditated upon his feet without interruption. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita 7:28, the Lord says that only those who have done pious deeds in previous lives and have become freed from the results of all impious acts can concentrate upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. The Pandavas, not only in this life, but also in their previous lives, had always performed the supreme pious work, and thus they are ever free from all the reactions of impious work. It is quite reasonable, therefore, that they concentrated their minds upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. According to Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha principles are accepted by persons who are not free from the results of impious action. Such persons affected with the contaminations of the above four principles cannot at once accept the lotus feet of the Lord in the spiritual sky. The Vaikuntha world is situated far beyond the material sky. The material sky is under the management of Durga Devi, or the material energy of the Lord. But the Vaikuntha world is managed by the personal energy of the Lord. Text 47, 48. Thus, by pure consciousness, due to constant devotional remembrance, they attain the spiritual sky, which is ruled over by the Supreme Narayana, Lord Krishna. This is attained only by those who meditate upon the one Supreme Lord without deviation. This abode of the Lord Sri Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavan, cannot be attained by persons who are absorbed in the material conception of life. But the Pandavas, being completely washed of all material contamination, attained that abode in their very same bodies. Purport. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, a person freed from the three modes of material qualities, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, and situated in transcendence, can reach the highest perfection of life without change of body. Srila Sanatana Goswami in his Hari Bhakti Vilas says that a person, whatever he may be, can attain the perfection of a twice-born Brahmana by undergoing the spiritual disciplinary actions under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, exactly as a chemist can turn gunmetal into gold by chemical manipulation. It is therefore the actual guidance that matters in the process of becoming a Brahmana, even without change of body, or in going back to Godhead without change of body. Srila Jiva Goswami remarks that the word he used in this connection positively affirms this truth, and there is no doubt about this factual position. The Bhagavad Gita also affirms this statement of Srila Jiva Goswami, when the Lord says that anyone who executes devotional service systematically, without deviation, can attain the perfection of Brahman by surpassing the contamination of the three modes of material nature. And when the Brahman perfection is still more advanced by the self-same execution of devotional service, there is no doubt at all that one can attain the supreme spiritual planet, Goloka Vrindavan, without change of body, as we have already discussed in connection with the Lord's returning to his abode without a change of body. Text 49. What time did we start?
At 8.
We started at 8.
Yes.
TK. Text 49. Vidura, while on pilgrimage, left his body at Prabhas. Because he was absorbed in thought of Lord Krishna, he was received by the denizens of the Pitriloka planet, where he returned to his original post. You remember he was Yamaraj. Purport. The difference between the Pandavas and Vidura is that the Pandavas were eternal associates of the Lord, the personality of Godhead, whereas Vidura is one of the administrative demigods in charge of the Pitriloka planet and is known as Yamaraj. Men are afraid of Yamaraj because it is he only who awards punishment to the miscreants of the material world. But those who are devotees of the Lord have nothing to fear from him. To the devotees, he is a cordial friend, but to the non-devotees, he is fear personified. As we have already discussed, it is understood that Yamaraj was cursed by Manduka Muni to be degraded as a Shudra, and therefore Vidura was an incarnation of Yamaraj. As an eternal servitor of the Lord, he displayed his devotional activities very ardently and lived the life of a pious man, so much so that a materialistic man like Dhritarashtra also got salvation by his instruction. So by his pious activities and the devotional service of the Lord, he was able to always remember the lotus feet of the Lord, and thus he became washed of all contamination of a Shudra-born life. At the end, he was again received by the denizens of Pitriloka and posted in his original position. The demigods are also associates of the Lord without personal touch, whereas the direct associates of the Lord are in constant personal touch with him. The Lord and his personal associates incarnate in many universes without cessation. The Lord remembers them all, whereas the associates forget, due to their being very minute parts and parcels of the Lord. They are apt to forget such incidents, due to being infinitesimal. This is corroborated in the Bhagavad Gita 4.5. Text 50. Draupadi also saw that her husbands, without caring for her, were leaving home. She knew well about Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Both she and Subhadra became absorbed in thoughts of Krishna and attained the same results as their husbands. Purport. When flying an airplane, we cannot take care of other planes. Everyone has to take care of his own plane. And if there is any danger, no other plane can help one in that condition. Similarly, at the end of life, when one has to go back home, back to Godhead, everyone has to take care of himself without help rendered by another. The help is, however, offered on the ground before flying in space. Similarly, the spiritual master, the father, the mother, the relatives, the husband, and others can all render help during one's lifetime. But while crossing the sea, one has to take care of himself and utilize the instructions formerly received. Draupadi had 5 husbands, and no one asked Draupadi to come. Draupadi had to take care of herself without waiting for her great husbands. And because she was already trained, she at once took to concentration upon the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The wives also got the same result as their husbands. In the same manner, that is to say, without changing their bodies, they reached the destination of Godhead. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur suggests that both Draupadi and Subhadra, although her name is not mentioned here, got the same result. None of them had to quit the body. Text 51. There it is. Conch shell of Maya. Calling us back to the material world. But we won't listen. Conch shell of Maya. Some come, help me carry one thing to another. The subject of the departure of the sons of Pandu for the ultimate goal of life, back to Godhead, is fully auspicious and is perfectly pure. Therefore, anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith certainly gains the devotional service of the Lord, the highest perfection of life. Purport. Srimad-Bhagavatam is a narration about the personality of Godhead and the devotees of the Lord like the Pandavas. The narration of the personality of Godhead and his devotees is absolute in itself, and thus to hear it with a devotional attitude is to associate with the Lord and constant companions of the Lord. By the process of hearing Srimad-Bhagavatam, one can attain the highest perfection of life. Namely, going back home, back to Godhead, without failure. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, 15th chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled The Pandavas Retire Timely. So now the question is whether if we should go on. It's 8:35. We should stop. Doctor order. Okay, we got something in, and now we're going to take reflections. We'll start chapter 16 tomorrow. Anything that's stuck in your mind? There are a few things that are sticking in a few persons' minds in this room right now from that reading.
I had a reflection.
Hannah has a reflection. Go ahead, Hannah.
You told me in the beginning of starting these books that
I told you in the beginning of you starting to read these books
if you listen enough and if you listen attentively, just like this last paragraph said, if you hear it with a devotional attitude, you associate with the Lord and constant companions of the Lord. And by the process of hearing Srimad-Bhagavatam, one can attain the highest perfection of life, namely going back home, back to Godhead without failure. And you can feel that when you read attentively and you
Yes.
continue to read.
Yes, it's palpable. You just have to continue. Don't stop. That's my personal realization. Also, my reflection. It works, and it works for everybody. It's not that it works for some, it doesn't work for others. But It doesn't work for those who don't want to hear, who don't listen attentively, who don't practice what they preach, practice what they hear.
I also liked this one, because I personally experienced this before coming here. One must not only think that he is Brahmin, but must act like Brahmin. One who only thinks himself Brahmin is an impersonalist, and one who acts like Brahmin is a true devotee. Because if you're an impersonalist, there's no service.
Exactly.
You don't know about who to serve.
Exactly.
And so you can't be pure, and it's very, very hard. So you always feel this yearning and this incompleteness.
Yes, and that yearning and incompleteness drives the senses to material activities and sense gratification. Because the soul has to be happy. So if it's not going to be happy in the spiritual world, it has to try to be happy in the material world. There's no third alternative. Well, there is. It's mixed. It's called mixed happiness and distress. But yes, that's right. Absolutely right. Hare Krishna. Yes, Vishal.
On Sunday feast a few weeks ago, Hanuman Swami gave a class and he said that...
On a Sunday feast a few weeks ago, Hanuman Prashad Swami gave a class and he said...
He said, Srila Prabhupada said that...
Srila Prabhupada said...
That in writing these books and purports...
In writing these books and purports...
So that when I'm gone...
So that when I'm gone...
You can all gather around and read the books...
So you can gather around and read the books...
And be happy.
And be happy. I was in the room when Prabhupada said, just before he left, go on discussing Srimad-Bhagavatam among yourselves, and everything will remain clear. And then when I was reading the last parts of the Bhagavatam that he finished during that time, one of the purports had that statement almost word for word, not completely word for word, but almost word for word. So I got the benefit of hearing it from his mouth and then seeing it appear in his books.
Was there any difference?
Yeah, there was a little difference. It wasn't exactly the same, but the meaning was exactly the same. Meaning was the same. It's 10:2 something. The first. Here it's in the purport, brother. I can't remember the number of the verse. 10:2:37.
Why did Maharaj use here 15 solid foods, less nutrients?
Because, the less we eat and the less we sleep, the more our subtle body becomes strong and capable of perceiving the difference between matter and spirit. That's why sometimes when we go through some intense physical thing, like you went through some intense physical thing, and it forces you to eat less, sleep less, do those kinds of things less, and then you get realizations from it. I mean, it's partly due to the actual effect of the whole thing together, but it's also due to the physical, reduction of material activities.
Then why does it talk about how unnecessary fasting is not?
Because not everyone's on the same level of spiritual advancement, and if someone tries to do spiritual fasting and things like that prematurely, then he just becomes disturbed and falls into Maya. It's meant to be regulated. That's why Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says to beginners, don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little, don't eat too much, don't eat too little, and then you can perform yoga. If you try to sleep less than you're capable of doing, then you'll just fall down. Same with sleeping, same with everything else. Regulation is the key. Therefore Krishna says in the Gita, Tasmat Tvam Inriyanyado Niyamya Bharatarshabha Papmana Prajahiyenam Jnana Vijnana Nashanam. He said, therefore from the very beginning, one must regulate the senses. Control the mind and regulate the senses. And destroy this, and conquer this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Jnana Vijnana Nashanam. Lust. So I was just going to look up, just in case I happen to remember it, which is it's not very probable after all this time, but 10, 2, 37. I mean, this will be a little bit of a miracle if I can remember this. Oh, 10, 2, 37, sorry. 10, 2, 10, 2, 37. Oh, this was the wrong. No, I didn't remember correct. This is also a very important part. Prabhupada says the word kriyasu, meaning by manual labor or by work, is important in this verse. One should engage in practical service to the Lord. In our Krishna consciousness movement, all our activities are concentrated upon distributing Krishna literature. This is very important. One may approach any person to induce him to read Krishna literature so that in the future he also may become a devotee. Such activities are recommended in this verse. Kriyasu yach twach chadanada vindayo. By such activities, such activities will always remind the devotees of the Lord's lotus feet. By fully concentrating on distributing books for Krishna, one is fully absorbed in Krishna. That's samadhi. That's different. Anyway, it's there. I'll just have to look it up. I can research and find it and share it with you another day. Something else, please. Anything else? Yes, Yerutama.
I was wondering about that verse Matt was kind of alluding to a little bit. Maharaj Yudhishthira going to merging his life affairs. We hear about that in chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita and a little bit chapter 4. About how is this process automatic when we become focused on Krishna? As in, I don't
It's not automatic. It's already achieved. Because the goal of it is to remember Krishna. And if you remember Krishna, then you've already done it before. But it's not possible to do that in this age. That's why when we hear it, we go, what? No way can we do that. Reverse the process of creation within our own selves. I mean, that's requires extreme sense control, extreme mental control. Takes tens of thousands of years to be able to come to that position. But Dhritarashtra came to it in a very short time by the mercy of Vidura. So therefore, if we just associate with Srila Prabhupada, and that's the main thing about reading Prabhupada's books and staying absorbed in Prabhupada's books, you associate with a person who is actually empowered to get you there. So if you become actually attached to this, to enjoying it, or if you even become attached enough that you enjoy seeing others enjoying it, you get the same result. The cell phones are starting to freak out. Everybody's trying to get a hold of everybody. This is what's going on. This world. Let me see, 10, 12. 10:13. Could it be the last? No, it's just I'm not going to be able to find it. Sorry, folks. It was in one of the last ones, though. Okay, what else? Yes, Austin.
I'm just wondering, could you say how it is that we achieve by association through reading these books?
Because the sound of his words are not different than him. In the same way that the holy name is not different than the holy name. Not only him, but also all the personalities in these books. We heard that the other night, didn't we? Just the other night we heard a purport that said we associate with these persons in the books, and we also associate with Prabhupada by reading the books, because the sound is not different than him. He's liberated soul. Liberated soul's sound is not different than his form. His activities are no different than him. So that's why when you meet devotees who are fixed in Krishna consciousness, then you go forward automatically, like you get like a supercharged thing, like a carburetor that's, what is it called? That fuel injected. There's a verse in the 11th canto that says, if a person is fortunate enough in this life, to have seen a liberated soul, in other words, if the form of a liberated soul goes onto your eyeball and you actually see him, then you become a worshipable person yourself. So that's how it's going on, the disciplic succession. John, did you have something?
No, I just like that one verse that wool should not rot in the dark, wherever the counsel of life will be dragged out.
Oh, I saw you react to that one. Just in case you don't know, he was married before, and I don't exactly know what happened. I'm not going to get into that, but whatever happened, he decided not to go back, and he's been living, by himself for 20 years. And here he is.
Anyway, that was
You can relate to it. You can relate to it because you had it happen to you. Therefore, you relate. That's right.
As we were talking earlier today, and you mentioned that he had gotten books, like what, 20 or 30 years ago?
Bhagavad Gita about 30 some odd years ago.
There you go. It's right there. It's right there. The books, every one of them has a person's name on it. Anyway, I'm kind of spilling the beans here a little bit, but I've already mentioned it. I've already spilled the beans. It's all right. Everybody knows what I want. I came out last night and tonight in that lecture really strongly, and I want to create we are creating a enclave within this community, and if we just keep it up and organize it and get these books out, we'll get more young people in, and it'll grow in a very nice way. And we'll have an ashram full of full-time devotees, and then we'll blow the top of the roof off this place. It can be done, yes.
So are you saying that hearing in an organized way, sometimes it seems when we have such a nice organization with you coming, whether in Denver, we have such a nice big group where everyone goes out of their way to meet. But sometimes it feels like when you're gone, that it's a little bit more difficult to have that same sort of organization.
That's okay. Just do it. Nobody said it's not difficult. Prabhupada used to say, what is the difficulty? And everybody had a lot of things to say when Prabhupada said that. Well, Prabhupada, there's this. And then he'd just take it apart, pick it apart, and then he'd say, what's the difficulty? And then finally you would go, no, Prabhupada, there's no difficulty at all. Difficulty's just up here, that's all. Okay, I gotta stop. Hare Krishna. All, thank you very much. All glories to Srimad-Bhagavatam. Yudhishthira Maharaj ki jai. The Pandavas ki jai. The process of pure devotional service ki jai. Krishna Katha Das, Vrindavaneshwari Dasi, and Rishabdev Das ki jai. Boo.